The dodgy decisions, the disappointments, the utter disgraces. There are no glory days here, although some of our moments were momentous. They changed sport, and maybe Ireland, forever.
There'll be plenty of familiar faces. Some unfamiliar ones, some long faces, and a couple of faces only a mother could love. And the order they're in is all down to you.
For the past 6 weeks, you've been rating the moments on the RTE website. So if you're shocked with their position on the charts, get over it. It's your fault. And remember, this show isn't about the magic moments. It's not about Packy Bonner making that save, or magnificent Triple Crowns, or Michael Carruth's gold medal, or Seamus Darby's last-minute heroics, or Ronnie Delaney, or even Ireland winning the Rugby World Cup. Sorry, I must have dreamt that last one. Is it just me, or are they all looking at me?
So, where to start? It's 20 moments. So let's kick off with number 20, and an outspoken Kerry man. You don't get many of them, do you?
I'm a very passionate person about lots of things that I do in life, and maybe from time to time I express myself passionately. I don't deny that.
It's January 2003. All-Ireland finalists Kerry and their manager are on a well-deserved winter break in South Africa. Then Paddy gives a relaxed poolside interview to Irish journalist Kevin Kimmage.
It appeared in the Sunday Independent, I think, on a Sunday morning in January. And when you read it in cold print, it read awful, because it looked as if he was absolutely being derogatory about the Kerry supporters.
Like, don't tell me that literally Paddy O'Shea meant that. Never in a month of Sundays. Nobody would have, nobody's more Kerry or more respect for Kerry than the people of Kerry than Paddy.
What Paddy said was, Kerry people are the roughest type of animals you could ever deal with, and you can print that. So they did print that.
If I feel strongly about something, if I have something to say, I'm sure I'll say it.
Kerry County Board has issued a statement in which they disassociate...
The Kerry supporters are very hurt and offended by the statements that...
And the air has to be cleared.
The air has to be cleared. Could we be looking at resignations?
You're very, very serious.
I think what added a little bit of fuel to the furnace then was that Marty Morrissey was on holidays out there. And I think Marty, being a good clear man, he sees an opportunity.
This is beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. For one man, it's been difficult to relax. Tonight, Paddy O'Shea clarifies his position. So I went up to his hotel and he was upset over. He knew what he wanted to say and I knew what he was trying to say.
That probably added more fuel to the fire, because during that holiday I wasn't short to fuel myself out there either. I don't know what all this bloody thing is about at all.
There are people, you know, Paddy, who in Kerry feel you should resign. Will you be resigning as Kerry manager?
No more than that boat out there, look. Will I resign?
The question now remains, will the Kerry people and the Kerry County Board forgive and forget?
Kerry supporters they are animals for success, and it was a compliment that I was making to Kerry.
Eventually, I think people appreciated that Paddy meant no harm, because Paddy is a good man.
Now, usually it's the ref's lineage that's up for debate, but at number 19, the tables are turned. In 1965, FIFA, the world's governing body, came up with a rule that would change Ireland forever: the grandparent rule.
The grandparent rule was useful to Ireland because of our economic history, where so many people of previous generations had to go to England to find work.
Before that, you had to be born in the country to play for that country.
Now, first and second generation Irish players could wear a green shirt, and boy did we use that rule. Lawrenson, Houghton, Houghton, Aldridge, Sheedy, McAteer, Mick McCarthy.
Irish blood, English heart, this I'm made of.
Well, you just have to go back to, the good old days of Jack and look at his team and listen to the accents when you were sitting in their hotel, I suppose, and if you heard an Irish accent, you were probably doing well. You look at Anna Veen being sang, and many of the players were singing it.
One of these new grandparent rule players had a proud and traditional Irish name, Cascarino.
He was great. He was, you know, a good top class player. He was playing, I think, for Chelsea at the time. You know, he was recognised as a good player. He was Jack's type of player. You know, big, bustling centre forward. Hit it up to him. If he doesn't win the ball, he'll knock 2 or 3 of them aside. And he was a skillful player as well.
Cascarino. Oh yes.
But Tony Cascarino discovered that he had one small problem.
They were in Liechtenstein maybe when he found out about it, and he mentioned it to Andy Townsend, and he was just gobsmacked. Well, what are we going to do, you know? I think Andy was saying, well, for fuck's sake, say nothing, you know.
So Tony said nothing and kept his little secret quiet for another 24 international caps, until it was time to write an autobiography.
So it was kind of hard to get a publisher, and then I said, well, you know, what if, you know, the most capped Irish player was never actually entitled to play for Ireland? Yeah, that's definitely it. There's nothing, we can sell a few books on the back of that.
When is an Irishman not an Irishman? Well, no better man to tell us than the man who's in the eye of this particular storm. Will you welcome, please, Tony Cascarino.
After 64 games for Ireland, Cascarino had discovered his mother was adopted and his Irish grandfather wasn't his grandfather.
I revealed it because I wanted to do a book, and I wanted to do it from the start to the finish, from a total honesty thing. And this was a big story that happened to me in '96, when I found out that I wasn't the grandson of Thomas O'Malley. It became a bit of a... It was eating away in me.
For a while now, it would have rattled him, seriously rattled him. But then he just got on with it, and he certainly... I don't think he felt he cheated anybody.
But it was a shock. You just wonder if all those games he played in should be taken off the record books.
The FAI referred the matter to the top. The Department of Foreign Affairs concluded that through the adoption, his mother had gained the right to Irish citizenship. Kaz's caps were safe.
You know, everybody speaks about Tony, but there was actually 1 or 2 others who had absolutely no claim whatsoever who got in there, you know? So I think there's probably grounds for investigation in 1 or 2 of the others, all right.
At number 18, it's the only sting that doesn't hurt. The day the bookies nearly lost their shirts to an Irish horse called Gay Future.
Here they come now. The one in front is Gay Future.
The idea of stinging the bookies is always romantic.
Well, it's probably the most daring betting code that's ever been pulled off, and certainly in recent times.
The money has nothing to do with it. It's the pulling it off. That's the crack.
In 1974, Cork businessman Tony Murphy, Neil Tobin, and his horse trainer, Edward O'Grady, Pierce Brosnan, sent their horse, Gay Future, to Scotland, to the stables of Tony Collins, this less famous guy. At least, everybody thought it was Gay Future.
Well, you're a cute horse.
People over there were under the impression that this horse was Gay Future. You know, this horse apparently couldn't run to warm himself, and anybody watching him on the track thought he was absolutely useless.
For 12 months, the real Gay Future was being trained to perfection in Tipperary, while the horse that everyone thought was Gay Future was taking it nice and easy across the water.
Gay Future? The only future this bugger's got's a knacker's yard.
Gay Future was eventually entered into his first race. But which Gay Future? The good one, of course. The swap took place on the side of the road, on the way to Cartmel Racecourse in the north of England.
We brought him over on the Thursday or Friday, a couple of days before the race. And they picked Cartmel because there was very little phone communication to it.
So with the bookies cut off, and given that Gay Future had no track record and a dreadful word of mouth, they were offering long odds. But Murphy and his friends didn't want to arouse suspicion.
They had planned to go around London in a taxi and put money on at a variety of betting offices. Officially, they had declared 3 horses to run from Tony Collins' stable, and they had their bets on trebles, doubles and trebles, mainly trebles.
The idea was that if you do a triple, back 3 horses, and if the other 2 don't run, the triple become a single.
With £30,000 bet on Gay Future across London, 2 things had to happen. The other 2 horses in the treble had to be declared non-runners. As both of these were from Tony Collins' stable, guess what? They didn't show. And, of course, Gay Future needed to win.
Come on, Gay Future, come on!
He won, sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, 10 to 1, they made 300,000. Well, that's what they'd hoped to win, but then things went wrong after that.
Wrong indeed, and all down to one man who didn't stick to the plan.
The big mistake they made was that with the 2 non-runners, they never sent the 2 horses out of the yard.
You see, the plan was he was to take him and break down with the box. He was to take him to the races, break down with the box. And if you break down on the motorways in England, you're towed away. So that they couldn't get to the races in the story.
But a reporter phoned Tony Collins' stables that evening and asked about the other 2 horses.
Are you saying that Opera Cloak and Ankerwick didn't leave the yard?
As a matter of fact, I can see them from where I'm sitting now.
So the police were informed about that, and an investigation began.
So, instead of making 300 grand, the equivalent of over 2 million sterling today, Tony Murphy was brought to court and fined £1,000.
It wasn't a scam, really. I'd say it was a crack. A good bit of crack.
By a bunch of bloody pennies. That's what really gets my goat.
Gay Future.
If some of you had your way in the voting, every story tonight would have involved the same group of people. The men behind the green door. The FAI.
But at number 17 is the FAI moment that sticks in the memory more than most. Before there was the Gaffer, there was Merriongate. In 1996, a scandal engulfed the Football Association of Ireland. A scandal uncovered by investigative journalist Veronica Guerin, involving FAI officials and a shady dealer called George the Greek. A scandal so big, heads would roll.
The 2 principal victims of it, Joe Delaney and Louis Kilcoyne, were good guys. I think they got caught in the success of the Irish team in circumstances that they really couldn't handle, and the clamour for tickets.
Sheedy's won it back and Sheedy shoots.
Up until the late 80s, you couldn't give away Irish international soccer tickets. Then, everything changed.
Getting a ticket for an Irish World Cup match was a huge thing in the 1990s, and it was very difficult to get them, and it was difficult for the association to get them.
That was Van Arla, and Van Royce has lost it!
And we were totally unprepared for this. We didn't have the structures that we have today to cope.
You were absolutely hounded for tickets, and the higher up you were, people just would not believe that you hadn't got access to tickets.
The FAI were supposedly the ones in charge, so if it was anyone's job to get the tickets, it was theirs.
We are doing our best. If you want to lay the blame on anybody's feet here, I blame FIFA for the distribution. I've gone down this road many times. I'll say it and say it again, I don't care who hears me. I blame FIFA.
Joe Delaney and I think it was Sean Connolly, who was the General Secretary at the time, that they were asked to go and do whatever was needed to get tickets.
Because the way Ireland works is, you always look after a neighbour's child. You always look after someone you know.
After we sell out of tickets today, we will announce tomorrow about approximate time you come down here. So if you don't get a ticket today, you'll come tomorrow.
The problem was that everyone was there. Bishop Casey, Daniel O'Donnell, several eminent senior counsel. Who could say no to Bishop Casey? Who could say no to Daniel O'Donnell?
It's Italy against Ireland in the Giant Stadium.
The day we played Italy, that unforgettable day, when we went to the stadium, we thought because it was New York, it was packed with Italians. In fact, there were very few Italians there because all the Irish people had got the tickets.
During the competition, when they produced the tickets, which they did in numbers, you know, they were regarded as having done a great job and everybody was full of praise.
Not easy, onto it comes Houghton. And Houghton with a shot, and it's there!
The fans were happy and no questions were asked. Until 2 years later, when Veronica Guerin discovered that a dubious ticket agent, Theo Savariades, christened George the Greek, had absconded with over 200,000 quid's worth of FAI cash.
I don't think we dealt with touts per se, but we did deal with ticket cum travel agency types, and you had to. If they could find the tickets, we were prepared to take them.
Joe Delaney, who'd been responsible for ticket trading, admitted that after the tickets were received, the overall shortfall was £110,000, which he'd repaid the FAI personally.
Can you tell us how many tickets were involved?
I don't know. Can you recall any of that, Joe?
I have no documentation in front of me, you know.
I'm just trying to establish how many tickets.
I couldn't tell you. I really don't know.
People wanted answers. Not necessarily people wanted heads to roll at the very beginning. They wanted answers, but then when the answers didn't come, they certainly wanted somebody to pay the price.
With so many questions left unanswered, the FAI called an emergency general meeting, which came to be known as the Night of the Long Knives.
You've got to bring your explanation to the full FAI Council this evening. How do you think you'll be received?
I'll tell it as it happened. They can accept it if they want to. They've known me for 20 years.
The Night of the Long Knives, which in my 30 years in football was the most memorable 24 hours, certainly. And it was a long sitting for me and for a lot of the people. It started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the Friday afternoon, and it finished at 4 o'clock the next morning.
It was unpleasant. Yeah, we had to answer for our sins.
Louis Kilcoyne didn't get the backing of the association, and Joe Delaney, the treasurer, resigned.
He just basically came into the room and resigned, and that was the end of that. And that left the last man standing was Louis Kilcoyne.
I refused to stand down on the grounds that I'd done nothing wrong. But there was ultimately a vote of no confidence in me, and I had to depart. The council has made its decision. I respect that decision. I accept that decision. Thank you very much, and good night.
I don't think there could have been any other result given what was known to have happened at the time. It was perhaps the manner in which it was done and the way in which summary justice was meted out was kind of classic FAI style.
It was very sad. I felt very sorry for them. I felt a wrong had been done because all they were doing really was the Irish thing.
I'm not sure what they'd call him up in Tyrone, but in Dublin, this next man is a legend. All right, Charlie, off you get. I say get off, Charlie. Charlie, get off. Charlie, off!
Some people say, oh, you're famous, and I go, no, I'm infamous, not famous.
This is the story of infamous dub Charlie Redmond and the 1995 All-Ireland football final against Tyrone.
Charlie was a flamboyant guy. First of all, he was a fantastic free taker, one of the last great free takers that Dublin have had, really good ones now. He was the sort of player that made Dublin famous, the flamboyant forward.
There was a big talk about Charlie not being fit for the game.
He had some injury, and there was a great doubt as to whether he'd be fit to play. Anyway, good news. Charlie passed the fitness test and played.
During the game, I actually injured myself again scoring the goal, even though it was only the tap in.
Charlie didn't just play, he played out of his skin and got a crucial goal.
Well, I actually hurt myself, and I could be seen by my grimacing after the score.
But people don't remember Charlie for the goal he scored in that final. Oh no.
I think I came out for a ball underneath the Hogan stand and headed Paul Devlin, and Paul Devlin fouled me, and I was lying on the ground. Somebody fell down with their elbow right in the back of my neck, but I wasn't looking. And I took great umbrage with this, and I went after him, and I charged at him. The referee thought I headbutted him, and I said, listen, I charged at him, yeah, but I didn't headbutt him. The linesman came in, and what I heard then was the linesman saying, no, he didn't. So I assumed that the referee was changing his mind, so I was just stood there in front of the referee.
He probably didn't understand what the referee said. He's a dog, and the referee came from down the country in Tipperary, so he probably misinterpreted what he said.
There was no yellow cards or red cards at the time, and the referee, pointed us in the line, and whatever happened, Charlie, whether it was that the sun caught him in the eyes or whether he didn't obviously see it and didn't go off.
I think Charlie knew, and I think almost everybody else in the ground knew. So, regardless of the lack of cards, I think it was quite apparent that he should have been walking.
Here's Keith
About 5 minutes later, or a few minutes later, he got a ball up and went up along the sideline, stole on it.
I gave it into the corner forward, I think it was Paul Clark I endeavoured to kick the ball to.
And the story goes that Paddy Russell said to Charlie, you shouldn't be here.
And I said, yeah, I know, I only passed it, I fitness tested, I didn't think it was going to last this long anyway.
And he said, off you go.
I said, Paddy, you're making the wrong decision here.
Of course, there was more controversy before the end of that when Peter Kennan flicked the ball up to Sean McLaughlin and put the ball over the bar, and the referee blew for a foul against Peter. So that was adding insult to injury, if you like. Charlie Redmond didn't go off. Dublin won by a point. We didn't get a score that we might have had, which would have drawn the game.
Dublin take a 22nd title.
As far as I'm aware, the history books will show that we won by a point and the referee gave a free out, and as we know with the sending off, the referee is always right.
At number 15 is the controversial sale of hallowed soil.
Now, for all of you sitting at home in your Man U, Liverpool or Sunderland jerseys, there was a time when the only place to be at the weekend was the League of Ireland. And whether you liked it or not, the dream team was Shamrock Rovers, and the Theatre of Dreams was their home at Glenmalure Park in Milltown.
Chance for Rovers, a great chance for them as O'Connell scores. Tony O'Connell has scored.
It's like the words of the song. It was a part of Milltown, and Rovers were a part of Dublin in the rare old times.
Through to Paddy Ambrose, going through, and he scores.
Well, they were huge. I mean, Rovers are traditionally and have been in the history of Irish domestic soccer the Manchester United of Ireland. I think is the simplest way to put it. They were glamorous, they played great football.
And the crowds were fantastic, and people lived for the weekend match. It was the next best thing to religion.
I'd have to admit that at that time I was, and still am, a St. Pat's supporter. But what I do remember was the one team you wanted to beat was Rovers, and the one place you wanted to beat them was in Glenmalure Park.
The heyday of the League of Ireland was the 50s and 60s, but in 1972, Shamrock Rovers was bought by the Kilcoyne brothers, who dreamt they could bring back the glory days and lead the club to even greater heights. And they were prepared to back that dream with hard cash.
Rovers was a sleeping giant, and we thought we could do something about that.
they had great ambition. They invested a huge sum of money for the time, mid-70s.
John Giles, probably Ireland's greatest ever footballer, came back home to his native city and took over as player-manager at Rovers.
We went on a full-time professional policy, and that cost a huge investment.
It looked as if, and I must say, you know, all the signs were that things were going to take a turn for the better. But despite the standard of football, despite the winning of trophies and so forth, etc., the crowds just didn't come and watch the games. It's as simple as that.
The biggest gate we ever got for a domestic game was in '78 when John Giles came back. And we got less than 4,000 people against Bohemians in a quarter-final. But typically, the average attendance, and it would range from 400 to 1,500. The regular Rover support had just given up. Beyond a few hundred regular good guys, they didn't give a damn.
Basically, they couldn't get the bodies in through the gates to justify the money they were spending. And in the end, they were facing financial ruin.
By the mid-1980s, Giles and Dunphy had moved on. So had most of the fans. The club was going broke, and they only had one asset.
The option of selling what was a very historic sporting venue was always there. I think they were reluctant to take it.
And my brothers, in effect, said to me, look, we're out of here. We've had enough. We can't go on propping this up. It's a lame duck.
In 1987, the Kilcoynes announced their intention to sell Milltown.
March last and Shamrock Rovers celebrate 4 league wins in a row. But within weeks, a shock announcement.
Shamrock Rovers are pleased to announce that they have decided to play football at Tolka Park from next season. Both Home Farm and Shamrock Rovers have set themselves the objective of developing Tolka Park into a modern, all-seated stadium worthy of soccer in Dublin in the 1990s.
I think it was Sligo who played Rovers in the last match in Milltown, you know, and it took some time to get people off the pitch afterwards, you know, with banners and so forth, etc., chanting and so forth. People were pretty mad about it, all right.
We've gone 45 years going to Milltown, and Kilcoynes are just tearing the hearts out of Shamrock Rovers.
I think it's very sad. It won't be the same coming out to see Shamrock Rovers playing again. Not in Tolka Park.
They formed this organisation, CRAM, Keep Rovers of Milltown, and they had all-night vigils and they had publicity, and it wasn't just a one-off thing. It went on for weeks and months.
We had meetings, we raised finance, we tried to see the Kilcoynes, they wouldn't talk to us. We did what we could.
One of the things that stuck in my memory was, you know, there were very, very small gates, 500-600 people going to matches, and yet when they said they were going to sell the ground, all of a sudden there was 30 or 40,000 people objecting, and you'd wonder, you know, where were all those people when you kind of needed them, which was to go through the gates and watch the matches.
I don't accept, can't accept, and never will accept that they have the right to move to Tolka Park. Never.
Those supporters and others who hadn't been helping us by way of attending boycotted the games at Tolka, and that was when we threw our hat at it. That was the end for us.
By the end of the 87 season, the grounds at Milltown had been sold to a property developer, and a year later, the Kilcoynes had sold the club itself.
Whenever I pass Milltown and see those apartments and houses, I feel a little pang of sadness.
Those of us who have been or were involved in the CRAM will take it with us to our graves that we fought the good fight, but just, you know, we were up against a stone wall. It's as simple as that.
So, we've had the manager who called his supporters animals. But still to come, we have the player who called his manager an English and a sporting legend who threatened to have his teammates shot. Makes you proud, doesn't it? Watching.
But first, at number 14, it's the day we showed those rugby world champions a thing or two. Nelson Mandela's release in 1991 brought to an end one of the most oppressive regimes and mentalities in the world, apartheid. In January 1970, at the height of apartheid, the oppressive regime landed on our doorstep in the form of a UK and Ireland tour by South Africa's whites-only rugby team, the Springboks. And the team didn't quite get the 100,000 welcomes they were hoping for.
Poor Springboks just couldn't believe. I mean, the trade unions wouldn't serve them dinner. The busmen wouldn't drive the buses. The unions boycotted it, the tour.
On the day of the match, 6,000 people turned out to protest and encourage fans to boycott the game.
People were saying politics and sport should not be mixed. That we just want to watch the rugby match, to which we would say, look, we're not asking you to do very much. But if you don't agree with apartheid, if you don't agree with segregation, then show your disagreement by simply boycotting the match.
Ellis getting it back, Dorvin de Villiers, lawless.
The match went ahead, behind barbed wire. 15 white men chosen because they were Irish, versus 15 white men chosen because they were white.
It's over, Ireland have scored! And they're going for a pushover try, and they've got it! It's a try for South Africa.
We were behind 8-5, I recall, and it seemed the referee was determined to play on till nightfall, if it necessary, so that we didn't lose the match.
The post is a penalty to Ireland, under the post. He comes up, he kicks, it's over! The sides are level, the final whistle has gone.
It would be another 11 years before the first black man played for South Africa, but that day in 1970 left a lasting impression.
Now, the next moment you voted for involves a man born with a big talent, and in this instance, an even bigger mouth. Actually, do you know what? The best person to explain this is Sean Boylan.
My mother, Laurie Gutter, she died in 1989. And I came in from training one night. And Mammy was sitting in the sitting room of the house. She had her 2 feet up on another chair. She had a cigarette in one hand and a drop of brandy in the other. And I walked in, having come back from training, and the first thing my mother says to me, shh, shh, Alex Higgins.
He was definitely why I took up the game, and I'm sure a lot of the other players took up the game as well.
People loved him, wanted him to do well. 22 years of age when he won the World Championships at 23.
Totally different to anybody else. He was always puffing on a cigarette, drinking his gin and tonics and potting the most unbelievable pots.
Another tremendous shot.
A great guy, a brilliant talent, but he was volatile, he was mad, he was strange, he was completely uncontrollable.
Fantastic. And the Embassy World Snooker Champion for 1982 is Alex Hurricane Higgins.
Alex Higgins' volatility earned him money, adoration and notoriety. And possibly the most notorious moment involved his fellow countryman, Dennis Taylor.
Higgins came from the sort of the rebellious snooker tradition. Dennis Taylor was a more conservative figure.
But funny enough, they used to get on in their early days because they used to play in the same club in Blackburn, and they got on because they used to obviously play around the circuit in Northern Ireland and the UK, exhibitions and stuff like that.
In 1990, Taylor, Tommy Murphy and Higgins made up the Northern Ireland team which got to the final of the Snooker World Cup.
The World Cup was happening in Bournemouth. Okay, you're beaten by Canada in the final, so you're a bit, miffed that you haven't gone on to win the tournament.
The prize money was split 3 ways, and Alex Higgins presumed that the highest break would be split 3 ways as well, because obviously he didn't make the high break. Dennis Taylor did, But of course, there was nothing said beforehand, according to Dennis Taylor, so he presumed the break was his.
Realising he wasn't going to get a cut of Taylor's highest break check, Higgins threatened him. But it was no ordinary threat.
I think he said, you know, you're from Coal Island, I'm from the Shankill Road. The next time you're in Northern Ireland, I'll have you shot.
It was very, very serious, and Dennis Taylor was greatly, greatly affected by it.
Only 6 days later, when the story was barely off the front pages, the pair faced each other at the Irish Masters in Goffs.
I mean, you want to see all the players were out in the balcony, all the press, everybody that was involved in the tournament, and of course there must have been Goffs only holds about 900 people sitting. I think there was about 2,500 people there.
Hoping to just knock a few more in than he will.
But you're still upset about what he said?
Yeah, well, that'll take a while.
Everybody knew this was something extraordinary, and I suppose technically you could call it a handshake, but it was not given with any great grace by either player.
The flashes of cameras went off, and it was just amazing atmosphere. One of the best matches for atmosphere I think it was ever at.
It was quite extraordinary. You could cut that tension with a knife. It meant everything to Dennis. Dennis had to win, and he did win. And I think maybe it might have had a mild effect on Alex when he realised, because there was a huge volume of support for Dennis, and normally at all of the Goffs tournaments at the Irish Masters, Alex would have been the crowd favourite, absolutely, no question.
At number 12 is an allegation that had certainly kicked the wheels from under you.
Sadly, there's nothing shocking anymore about the words drugs and cycling in the same sentence. But when the allegations involve the words drugs, cycling and Stephen Roche, now that would make you sit up and listen.
As you probably read in the newspapers, the name Stephen Roche has turned up in the files of an Italian doctor. Now, this doctor is under investigation for doping athletes. He hasn't been convicted yet, but the investigation is underway. His name is Dr. Conconi, and he was involved in experiments with EPO. It's an almost undetectable substance which boosts an athlete's performance.
EPO was the difference between, you know, this whole argument, well, you don't take a donkey and make him into a derby winner. With EPO, you do.
It's basically blood doping. So rather than sending athletes up the mountains for high altitude training, they synthesize a drug that they would just take, and it would have exactly the same effect.
The athletes who use it will feel that they've got something like 15 or 20% extra power, extra strength when it's required.
So let's just get your definitive statement on EPO or any of the other performance drugs, but this is the one that is in the news at the moment. Did you ever take EPO?
Never.
Do you think it's possible that you were given EPO without your knowledge?
Never. Like, I was always aware of everything that was ever given to me, because I never took a pill or a Smartie or an ampoule without actually knowing or seeing the box that it came out of.
The allegations related to Roche's final tour in '93, 6 years after he'd won the event, at a time when EPO didn't exist.
A young 27-year-old Dubliner has not alone won the Tour of Italy, but the Tour of France, all in the same year.
He's so fit. He is obviously a perfect athlete and an all-round sportsman.
Drug taking in cycling was nothing new, but in 1990, cycling pro Paul Kimmage quit the sport and published his frank account on the scale of the problem. Rough Ride caused a huge stir, but many, including Roche, were dismissive of his claims.
It was too easy to dismiss Paul Kimmage's book as, well, it's a once-off. You know, he was no good, forget about him. It's a bitter little rant by a bitter little man. It wasn't as easy to dismiss what happened in '98.
In 1998, French police busted one of the Festina team's entourage en route to Ireland for the Irish leg of the Tour de France with a carload full of EPO. As a result, the entire Festina team was suspended. Cycling was fast becoming the dirtiest sport. But Stephen Roche's reputation remained intact. That is, until investigators in Italy found that Dr. Conconi, who was being funded by the International Olympic Committee to develop EPO testing, was actually administering the drug to professional athletes.
There were two other doctors involved, Cassoni and Grazzi. Grazzi was a sort of assistant, in inverted commas, to Conconi. And Grazzi was also the team doctor for the cycling team, of which Roche was a member.
Well, Grazzi would have been on certain events with the team. Basically the major events like Tour of Italy, Classics, Tour de France. And he would be there basically to make sure anyone got a sore eye, a fall off, or making sure everything was okay. And also then maybe 2 or 3 times during a major tour, he would do blood tests. And those blood tests would be, the blood would be taken and sent then to the institute in Ferrara to be analysed for vitamins and everything else, you know.
During the investigation, Roche's name was found in the Conconi files under 5 different aliases.
There was also a column attached to each name, and I think there were about 25 names. In the column, there would be an S for C, which would indicate whether that athlete had been given EPO or not. And Roche's name and his aliases had C in many of the columns associated with it, which would indicate that this person called Roche, or the aliases of Roche, was receiving EPO from Mr. Conconi.
The first time I heard about it was when it came out in the paper, and I went back and asked what the story was, how come my name was in there. He said, Stephen, your name is in there because when your blood comes back from events for testing, you're automatically on the files and everything else. He's going to use it then for his own experimentation, and he adds a code name to it to identify it. As Roche is no longer Roche's blood, it's Roncati or whatever other name he adds to it. So, but for me, that didn't seem illegal. There was nothing wrong about it, you know.
At all times, as a professional athlete, you know what you're doing, you know what you're taking, and you're aware of, because it's not as if, you know, the sport didn't have a problem with this and that there weren't controls and there wasn't an awareness of it. So, you know, that excuse that this was an experiment and, you know, all I did was give my blood, yeah, thanks very much.
It didn't mean a thing to me because the blood is going to a university. The university is there to study whatever comes in and to find out ways of kind of helping our next generation live longer and stop hair going grey and all kinds of problems and everything else. So, I mean, for me, there was no harm in it whatsoever.
The investigation itself was fraught with difficulties, and the outcome still seems to cause confusion in the higher echelons of the cycling world.
That investigation, if I remember rightly, went on for quite a long time. Conconi, I think, may initially have been declared guilty of doping athletes or something like that, but he appealed it, and on the appeal, he was cleared.
The doctors weren't acquitted. That's absolutely not true. The case didn't go to court.
I forget. I was so deeply involved in it and so deeply interested in it, I didn't even take time to read the conclusions, you know. I just believe it was thrown out for, I'm not sure, but I think it was actually thrown out because they were saying there was not enough cooperation between cyclists and everything else.
They have in Italy a sort of statute of limitations, which means that if an investigation and a prosecution is being carried out, they have to do that within a 5-year time frame. Now, this investigation and prosecution did not get completed within the 5-year time frame. So in that case in Italy, the charges just disappear and nothing happens.
However, the judge did issue an official report in the wake of the investigations.
She was damning in what she said in the report, and she said that there was no doubt that Mr. Conconi was giving EPO to athletes, and she mentioned 5 athletes' names, and one of those names was Roche.
The judge assumed, because there wasn't enough cooperation between the riders and the athletes and everything else, that she has to assume that there was something going on. But like I say, they have my phone number down there. Nobody ever rang me. So, I mean, it was a bit pathetical, I think, for a judge to come out and give such a conclusion, which could be so damaging to so many people.
If you want to profess to be clean and if you want to profess to be an authentic champion, in my view, you cannot be associated with any of these blood doper doctors.
A lot of it's all theory, and it's always going to stay theory. Like, you hear all kinds of stories, but at the end of the day, don't forget that I was, if I say to myself, an exceptionally classy cyclist.
Two of our moments tonight revolve around the trials and tribulations of Irish women in Atlanta, Georgia in 1996. This one is the story of how a young girl's dreams of Olympic gold didn't come true. In a collection of sporting shocks, nothing can be more shocking than seeing a hero take a fall. And what a hero.
Sonny O'Sullivan, the young 70-year-old from Ballymore, Cove. What an astonishing performance.
And what are your ambitions now?
Well, I'd like to run the Olympics, and I don't know, I'll take every day as it comes anyway.
Sonia, fantastic. Always fantastic.
She was from Cork, and growing up when she used to come home to the Mardyke, I used to just follow her around and try and get her autograph. She was just unbelievable to me. I mean, I guess she's what Roy Keane is to little boys now.
Sonia O'Sullivan from Cove comes home triumphant, the European champion over 3,000 metres.
It wasn't just that she was a fantastic athlete, but she was just a nice young one, and we all wanted her to do well for that reason as much as the talent.
It's just been such an emotional rollercoaster ride with her. It's an emotional investment following her career, the highs and lows.
Sonia O'Sullivan is the champion of the world, the first Irish woman to win a World Championship gold record. Ireland has a new world champion.
And we've had just some incredible highs, you know, Sydney World Championships, World Cross Country, and then of course Atlanta, which is the low that everybody remembers.
Before Atlanta, no Irish woman had won an Olympic medal. By the end of the first week, we'd won 4 in the swimming pool.
Who would have thought it? Brilliant swim, absolutely superb.
But the real hopes were resting on the shoulders of the girl from Cove.
The whole world knows that the Olympics are on, and I suppose there is a big expectation, and it's not really pressure, and people deal with it differently, but it's just the way you react in that situation, and people know that, you know, if I don't get this right today, I've got to wait another 4 years, and 4 years is a long time.
We did really expect her to come back with a medal, and we fully expected that that medal would be gold. She went in there as world champion, and really it was just a question of her turning up, or so we thought, and she would get this gold medal.
Hair has been dropped. It's now Sonia O'Sullivan lengthening her stride.
But she was always very highly strung. She always reminded me of a thoroughbred racehorse. You know, that was brilliant at what she did, but you know, you had to be really careful around her because she could get unsettled very, very easily, and it didn't take much to unsettle her.
And Redland is blown up as Sonia O'Sullivan lengthens her stride and stamps her class all over this race.
The expectations of an entire nation were on our shoulders, you know, for throughout the 90s, and I think that's what happened in Atlanta.
It was looking good. Sonia won her 5,000 metre heat with ease, barely breaking a sweat.
That was good to be over with. Just, you know, ready for the final now.
So at 1 in the morning back home, it was time to pull up a chair and watch our girl win her well-deserved Olympic gold.
I remember watching it with Eamon Coughlin and watching it with John Tracy. And they will tell you, as they line up, whether a person is going to do well or badly. And they were very concerned about Sonia.
I remember going in the night Meath played Tyrone in the All-Ireland semi-final in 1996. I remember going in at 1 o'clock in the morning at home to see her race on the telly. And Tina was with me, my wife, and my friend Dennis Murtha. I went in and had a look at the telly, and I saw Sonia. And I said, oh my God, I said, she's gone. And they said, what are you saying? I said, she's gone.
Well, through there, it's Conga who leads from Wang, and Sonia is really some way back at this point, perhaps.
We used to watch Sonia running all over the world, and as regular as the 8:20 pulling out of Houston, you could expect Sonia to start accelerating away with 200 metres to go. And here we were in Atlanta, the most important race of her life, and nothing happened.
Sonia O'Sullivan is now bringing up the rear of the field, and it is looking ominous.
For her to go out and have a bad day in 1 day in 4 years, it's kind of heartbreaking to watch.
1,600 metres to go at the end of this straight, and it's an awful sight to see an athlete of the calibre of the class of Sonia O'Sullivan simply tying up in the way that she has.
And then the sight of her, I mean, I think it's etched in everybody's memory, that sight of her trailing down at the end of the field, covered in sweat, and then just ducking off the track. You know, it's something that would just stay with you, and you're just, everybody's left scratching their heads and looking, knowing what happened.
That is an astonishing story that has unfolded before our eyes in Atlanta. A story that will take some time to be explained.
Just one of those things. She just got sick, and that was it. And it, you know, if it was the week earlier or the week later, you know, it might have been different.
If there was nobody watching you could just go away and you could analyse it and you'd say, oh, we can sort this out. But when you have, you know, everybody and their dog watching you, and you know, and then like, you know, media people as well, and you know, they all want to quiz you and they kind of like pin you down on a certain thing. Well, why did this happen? And yeah, that can be a problem for you, and it's difficult to come back from things like that.
There's so many people like supporting you that you're trying your best just as much for them, and there is a lot of expectation on you, and you do feel that you're letting down people as much as you're letting down yourself.
Any person who had to see her around the town, they're just totally shell-shocked really, like, because they were really expecting some sort of medal.
I think she can do better. There must have been something wrong with her last night. Like,
I remember her father, and John, God, you'd have to love him. You know, bring us all back down to earth.
We'll get up for work tomorrow, we'll go to work tomorrow, everyone will go to work tomorrow. No one has died, it's only a sport, and there will be another day.
You go out there and you try to get the good all the time, but you know, they're dishing out bad stuff as well, so you have to take some of that. But you know, I suppose you get on with it and you get up the next day and you say, okay, we'll try again.
Any ordinary athlete might have packed it all in despair, but Sonia was no ordinary athlete.
Every kid out there who loves sport and wants to compete would aspire to just competing in the Olympics. Now she took it to, you know, the ultimate level of competing with the best.
Sonia O'Sullivan is coming home to an unprecedented double. Only the second athlete in history to do the 5,000, 10,000 double. That is simply magnificent.
And she did Ireland so proud on so many occasions.
Sonia O'Sullivan against Shabble. Who's going to get there? Shabble digs deep. O'Sullivan attacks. It's a big race between the two.
She was perhaps the finest Irish representative, the finest ambassador for this country in any sport.
Shabble's holding on. O'Sullivan's got to drive for that line. But Gabriella Shabble, the Olympic champion. Sonia O'Sullivan is beaten on the line. What a fantastic final lap.
The next moment was the scrapping that threatened to scrap the compromise rules. Compromise, or international rules, had a reputation for being a physical game. But the 2005 series in Australia had been marred by violence, so hopes were not high for the Test series in Ireland a year later.
The compromise rules, they had been heading for that kind of disaster for a few years, mainly because the Australians do things in the compromise rules game that they will not do in their own game.
The first test in Galway passed off peacefully, but the powers that be sensed trouble ahead for the second test in Dublin.
The Australians and ourselves met at a press conference on the Friday, and we talked about what we would not like to see happening in Croke Park on the Sunday. The place will do the talking of both Australia and both the Irish teams. We'll be out there in that field out there, and in the proper manner and in the proper spirit, and within the rules of the game, and no other way.
This year, can Ireland put it up to the men from down under?
So obviously, no one wanted any rough stuff.
Well, you see, the marketing of these games beforehand was very, very strong.
One of its biggest selling points was always its physicality. You know, there's no compromise in international rules. That was the line that they used in the ad.
It was done in this sort of fake night stuff of Sky TV, you know, no compromise. I mean, the whole impact of that was, this is not really about football, this is about something else, you know.
It's Sunday, November 5th, 2006, and we're in Croke Park for the biggest ever attendance at an international sporting event in the history of Ireland. This is expected to be a battle.
The game didn't so much descend into violence. It was right down there from the start.
I thought it was a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. It was horrible to watch.
You know, if you tried any of that sort of thing on the street, you know, I think they call it common assault.
But I mean, grabbing lads around the neck and getting on top of them on the ground and breaking a bit of lard out of them to me, doesn't add up.
No, it's a contact sport. You know what you're getting when you go to watch it, and then you get all these people knocking around and then phoning in complaining. You know, don't watch it if you don't want to watch it.
The discipline, I have to say, is gone from both sides.
Don't give me that as sportsmanship. Don't give me that as trying to promote a series. Don't give me that. That's thuggery, and that's all that it is. I left Croke Park that day extremely dejected, extremely annoyed, and feeling that this series was simply hanging by a thread as to whether it could ever continue.
The series is still hanging by that thread, with its future to be decided in the next few weeks.
I forget the figures, but I mean, there were 82,000 people in Croke Park. It was a sellout crowd. There was another sellout in Pearse Stadium in Galway the previous weekend. So if the crowds are going and the television audience is huge, then you must have a product that is viable.
I know how much, from talking to the Irish lads, how much they want an international dimension. They see now the other games in Croke Park, let it be soccer, let it be rugby or whatever. They want to represent their country.
But it doesn't give them an international dimension playing Gaelic games. Therefore, to me, it's a complete fraud.
What they did that day brought sport to a new low, and it should never, ever be allowed to occur again.
The first new field game in 100 years in football. To reach the heights that it did with the crowds in Australia, with the crowds that you had here at home, let it be from Galway to, you know, and the carnival atmosphere and so on. You can't throw all that away.
If you think of the great GAA deadlocks, the epic four-game struggle between Dublin and Meath in 1991 comes to mind. But what about 1998? Hurling? Semi-final? Clare? Offaly? The one where the ref blew up early and all hell broke loose.
Well, I just remember that as being a complete farce.
Brian Wheelahan. Perfectly still day. That's a beautiful shot and that's a lovely point.
It was one of those incidents that was a freak incident. Of course it shouldn't have happened, but it was a genuine mistake, and it certainly defined the hurling year.
In 1998, Clare hurlers were looking for their third All-Ireland in 4 years.
Hurling in the 90s, it was the golden era, and Clare, while they mightn't have been the most successful team of the 90s, certainly were the story of the 90s. You know, they came from nowhere in 95 to win their first All-Ireland since 1914. A very charismatic and inspirational leader in Ger Loughnane. In 98, they went into that semi-final as All-Ireland champions.
This to make it level. He's done it.
But Offaly held the mighty Clare to a draw in the semi-final, and so it went to a replay in Croke Park.
I was a sideline reporter that day, and Clare were winning, and being a Clareman, of course, at that moment in time, I was quite pleased with the way things were going.
After a few stern words at half-time, we rearranged things a little bit, and there was a lot of positional switches, and we started to get back into the game. And
he's going for it. He's got it. With about 3 minutes to go.
They got a couple of goals. Brian Whelan came up full forward, and they had clawed it back to 3 points, I think, with
two minutes to go, I think.
What a finish we're having here. Offaly, who never really yielded to any opposition.
And then Jimmy Cooney blew the whistle, and then he blew it again.
This is the man. And the referee has blown up his whistle, but I think he's blown up before time. I think there are 2 minutes left. Now I wonder, are they discussing that? With Offaly going into protest to Jimmy Cooney.
Our captain of '94 made very strong gestures to the referee, and at that stage Jimmy looked at his watch and he said, "Listen lads, I'm after playing 3 minutes overtime." He looked at his watch, there was 33 minutes played.
Week in, week out, referees are refereeing 30-minute games, and he would have got his injury time as maybe 2 to 3 minutes and thought he had played these 2 to 3 minutes and blew the final whistle.
And with that, Martin said to Jimmy, "Jimmy, it's 35 minutes aside." And instantaneously he knew something was wrong.
I was delighted. I was saying we're in the All-Ireland now, and somebody involved in the Clare sideline, I think, said to me there was 2 minutes to go, and I said, like, sad that, like, the referee's decision was the referee's decision.
Well, that is a strange finish. And it ends with Clare winning by 116 to 210.
Within a matter of minutes, GAA officials came on and escorted Jimmy off the field, maybe thinking he was going to be assaulted or whatever.
There was a mad rush by the GAA officials to get the referee off the pitch so the next game could start. Whereas I think if there were cooler heads that have said to him, "Jimmy, you made a mistake there, there's 3 or 4 minutes left, let's play the game."
The Offaly people, being the Offaly people, wearing the green, white and orange, the faithful county, they went onto the pitch and they sat down.
Back here at Croke Park, there are extraordinary scenes taking place down on the pitch. The Offaly supporters have come onto the pitch and are now staging a protest.
It looked very strange. The television cameras were still there. In fact, there was supposed to be a game played after that, a hurling game between Kerry and Kildare, and the two teams are out on the field and couldn't play, and it wasn't played at all.
This was a Mexican standoff. Clare, who just won by 2 points, wanted to celebrate and prepare for the final. But Offaly wanted justice to be done.
I definitely think if there wasn't a refixture, it was going to get very, very nasty.
There was a whole lot of confusion in the Burrington. It was packed with Clare supporters who were saying, "No way were we going to replay it." And
now the rules of the GAA are quite specific. If a game isn't played to its full limit, the game must be replayed.
By 10 o'clock the next morning, word filtered through the media that there was a refixture the following Saturday.
Coming home on the bus, there was definitely a feeling of tiredness of how do we face into taking on the Eagles again, because Offaly definitely had the wind behind them at that stage, and we knew it was going to be another savage battle to beat them.
I could not see how Clare would beat us.
And they didn't. After agreeing to the replay, the All-Ireland champions...
No complaints about the results. Offaly were tremendous all over the field. They have fantastic players. Now they're in the All-Ireland, and we wish them the best of luck in the All-Ireland.
Not only that, but Offaly went on to beat Kilkenny in the final, all because of the referee's early whistle.
Some of the supporters still bring it up to this day. I'll find in the bar, they'd still say, "You should have got the third one."
Now, unfortunately, the poor referee, he got such stick and it became so personal.
I think the sad thing about the whole lot was that the GAA actually lost an exceptionally good referee in Jimmy Cooney, who felt that he could not continue. He took a lot of personal abuse, and his family took a lot of abuse, and nobody were more dedicated to the GAA cause than Jimmy Cooney and the rest of his family. And I think that was one of the real big losses.
We're about halfway through our countdown. This lot are fighting it out to be number one. I mean, who really wants the title of the most controversial moment in Irish sport anyway? Still, in the next half of the show, we're going to see plenty of nominees, literally busting, bruising and gouging their way to the top. We have a final handful of sporting controversies ahead of us. And as we get further up the ladder, the more controversial they get. Remember, this isn't about the unforgettable ole ole glory days. No. A lot of these moments are the ones you'd rather forget.
And I'm sure some of this lot would rather we forgot them too. Oh, come on, guys. Just for old time's sake.
Next up is a national first. The first Irish Olympian who had to hand back his medal. Drugs, theft, intrigue. And he seemed like such a nice horse.
At 8, it's Waterford Crystal. Oh, and Cian O'Connor. Even before the 2004 Olympic Games, Irish equestrianism was in disarray with rows and sackings. It was actually a relief just to get to Athens, especially for one so-called unknown.
Well, a lot of people say, Cian O'Connor came out of nowhere. He didn't. He had been very, very successful. He was the leading rider on the Nations Cup circuit the previous year. I mean, he jumped clear round after clear round after clear.
Cian is as cool as a breeze for a fella of his age, and he's a terrible, cool, steady fella. He always has been since I first came across him.
It was always something I wanted to do, to win the medal, to win the Olympic Games, and I wrote on the side of my truck 4 years before Athens that I was working towards the Olympics.
A cocky boy now, very cocky, but very cool and very capable,
I'm probably a little bit cocky, but I won't make any apologies for that.
I mean, the Olympics up until then had been a pure disaster. No Irish athlete in any sport had come within a sniff of a medal. And all of a sudden, the last day of the Olympics, Jessica Curtin was in the lead going into the individual final.
She'd been jumping superbly. You'd have put your money on her to win a medal. She went in, second last rider in, everything fell apart. She just knocked fences left, right and centre.
Oh, well, how sad.
Cian O'Connor just suddenly rose up through the ranks. He jumped.
There were a couple behind him then could have beaten him if they went clear, but they didn't go clear either.
Oh, down it goes. And another with one goal. Goal for Ireland.
It was just a magical moment. He'd saved the day. The sports minister was so thrilled that finally, and John Tracy from the Sports Council, they were so thrilled that somebody had actually come up and rescued them.
Three months later, however, O'Connor announced that Waterford Crystal had tested positive for prohibited substances.
Everybody was stunned, absolutely stunned, because if a horse tests positive, if there's a confirmatory analysis on the B sample and the two match up, that's it, your medal is gone.
O'Connor never actually denied that Waterford Crystal had been given drugs.
The horse was treated for a veterinary injury outside of competition a long time in advance of the Olympic Games, and residues of that medication was still in the system, which is unfortunate.
The sedative we gave him was supposed to be gone completely out of his system in the maximum of 10 days. But about 20-something days after, a tiny trace of it showed up.
It emerged tonight that the result of the test is positive for fluphenazine and zoclopentixol, both human antipsychotic drugs used as sedatives to reduce stress and anxiety.
The prohibited substances that were found in Waterford Crystal sample, they are deemed the most serious infringement of the International Federation's rules.
Now all this bullshit about doping and doping and doping, all this around the papers. If you have a horse jumping at the top level and give him sedative, he won't win for you because he won't jump, he loses his jump. It's as simple as that.
These horses are like toned, they're pure athletes, right? They're hyped up, you know what I mean? They're going in to compete in circumstances like that you and I would balk at. And these drugs such as these can make them more manageable.
While opinion is divided on the exact effect of these drugs, one thing was clear. It wasn't looking good for O'Connor. The B sample of Waterford Crystal's urine would hang him or clear him.
The B sample was sent over to the horse racing forensic lab in Newmarket in England, and literally as it went in through the driveway, it was collected by somebody who didn't belong to the horse racing forensic laboratory and signed for and was never seen again.
Quite a sinister
development, really. Far more questions than answers at this stage, and I don't like what I'm hearing one bit.
The best thing actually that came out of all that whole saga was one of the tabloids had the most brilliant headline. It was the entire front page and it was just 4 letters. Who's taken the piss?
But after they announced the disappearance of the B sample, the story took another twist.
The very same day, the Equestrian Federation of Ireland headquarters were broken into and files relating to the case suddenly disappeared.
Well, of course, they all made out to Cian O'Connor or me or somebody else broke into the offices. For what? What would we break into the offices for?
Following the break-in, it emerged that another one of Cian's horses, ABC Landliebe, had also tested positive.
That damaged his credibility big time, you know, because he knew about this and yet he didn't admit it when he was going public on the Waterford Crystal testing positive.
The gold medal is still very tarnished at this stage, I have to say, and Cian will be the first to realise that.
And then suddenly, that medal was not only tarnished, it was gone.
O'Connor was stripped of his medal, and the International Equestrian Federation banned him for 3 months.
The FEI found they did not deliberately set out to affect the performance of the horse. That was the finding. There was a zero tolerance level in place, and unfortunately we were over that, and we must accept the sanction, which happened to be to forfeit the competition, which unfortunately for me was the Olympic Games.
I've always wondered why the ban wasn't more severe. He could potentially have been banned for 2 years. There were so many procedural irregularities with samples going missing and things that I think the International Federation decided, well, we'll just say, okay, fine, yes, you're guilty of having your horse, competing with your horse with prohibited substances in him, but we're not going to say that you actually attempted to enhance the performance of the horse.
What people hear in the media or people's opinions that they form, albeit they feel they're correct. The only people who knew the full facts were the people in that room in Zurich.
Some senior vets from the International Equestrian Federation said subsequently to me when I was doing reports for the Irish Times, there was no chance that if those drugs had been given 5 weeks beforehand that they would still be shown, they would come up in the samples when they were tested.
Maybe that's something you need to take up with the FEI because they made the judgment, we abided by the judgment, so did the Equestrian Federation of Ireland, and I really think everyone should move on.
Cian now runs his own business, buying and selling horses and training young riders.
Head up. Good. Nice and relaxed.
He's no longer making his way to Athens, but has an equally upfront slogan on his truck this time round. And his sights are firmly set on London 2012.
You never lose your hunger. You never lose, you know, when you hear the national anthem being played and you see the flag being raised, it's a very special feeling. And being a part of the Irish team is something that I'm very proud of and very honoured to do. And when I go to competitions, whether it's in Ireland or abroad, nobody thinks of Athens.
At the time, people compared it to something you'd read in a Dick Francis novel, you know. But I think if you read this in a Dick Francis novel, you would think it was ludicrous, the whole thing, like, you know. Dick had lost the run of himself.
And we've never found out who stole the urine sample. We've never found out who broke into the Equestrian Federation offices, and I doubt that we ever will.
A bit of a surprise at number 7. It's David versus Goliath, or something like that.
It was an unfair match, really. I mean, on the one side, you've got 6'6" and 120 kilos of English rugby captain, Martin Johnson. And he's up against, well, President Mary McAleese. I mean, come on, Mary. Take it easy on the guy, will you?
What an occasion, what a venue, what a match in prospect. History either way.
It's 2003. And in the Six Nations, Ireland are hoping for their first Grand Slam in 55 years. England, the old enemy, have arrived in Lansdowne Road, hoping to claim the Grand Slam for themselves. It's all or nothing, as Martin Johnson leads out the away team.
He is a spectacular captain, all right.
I was working at Lansdowne that day and I was actually on the sideline, so I was just a few feet away from him. And he ran out and you could just see, I think it was just England, you know, setting out their stall right from the start. We won't be bossed around, we won't be told where to go or where to stand.
Whether by accident or accidentally on purpose, Johnson had led England out to the Irish side of the red carpet.
Personally, you know, I'd never really thought into which side we stood on and whatnot, and that wouldn't have affected me, to be honest. But some of the lads, as we were walking over, said that, you know, they're standing on our side. Let's either stand in front of them or stand to the side of them. I said, you can't stand in front of them. You'd be liable to get a box in the back of the head, so we'll just go down the far end of them.
The England team already lined up, but they're going to have to move to the left because protocol dictates that the home team stands as we look at them on the right, and England will stand away to the left, but they're going to have to move.
The coordinator came out and asked them to move along, and he told them in no uncertain terms to head off.
And Martin doesn't want to move. Oh, already a little aggro.
And no matter how many times they asked him to move, he was just not moving. He was in the zone and you could see that in his face. He was completely focused and he was not going to move. I mean, whatever you think about Johnson, he's a terrific leader. And he really didn't care if President McAleese's shoes got mucky on the grass. He wasn't moving.
I think, you know, this disrespect to Mary McAleese is absolute bullshit.
It's about losing face, and we certainly didn't want to lose any face, and neither did they.
It was a brilliant piece of sports psychology. I mean, clearly it upset everybody, it gave them an edge, it put England into a driving seat before the game had even started.
They hadn't managed to win the Slam the 3 previous years. They'd fallen at the final hurdle, so I think they thought this is our year and we're not going to let anything upset us.
On his way, and here for Darren Stellario is a try under the posts.
It really was shitting on somebody else's doorstep and standing over it and saying, yes, we did it. We're here to take over.
In a weird way, I almost have an element of respect for him.
Tyndall to the line.
You know, they were there for the Grand Slam and they left with it.
England the winners, England the champions.
It was the day for hating the English, wasn't it? And they gave us a really good reason to hate them.
The next moment in our countdown was literally that, a moment. In a split second, Brian O'Driscoll's world was turned upside down. Or maybe that's an unfortunate choice of words.
It's an event he refuses to talk about anymore, but that didn't stop you voting it in at number 6.
My next guest is lucky to be here in one piece.
For Captain Brian O'Driscoll, the 2005 British and Irish Lions Tour was meant to be the pinnacle of his playing career.
He was on top of his game, the world's best player, leader and captain of the Lions.
So he's out there wanting to showcase his talent on this Lions Tour, and within 90 seconds it's all over for him.
Whatever O'Driscoll's dreams were for the tour, Kiwi captain Tana Umaga and hooker Kevin Mialamu had other plans.
It was the single worst incident I've ever seen on a rugby pitch.
With rugby, you pretty much know what you can do and what you can't do, and you can't lift the guy upside down and drive his head into the ground.
To McDonald, O'Driscoll makes the tackle.
The ball certainly, I think, had gone by the time they'd picked him up, and they could have just let him go, but they chose to. It was a spear tackle.
What exactly is a spear tackle?
Basically, it's a tackle which you get picked up illegally and landed down on your head.
And O'Driscoll is riding around on the ground in pain.
I saw it happening. I kind of was one of those weird situations where it happened in slow motion, and I knew that I needed to get my head out of the way, so my shoulder took the brunt of the fall.
And if O'Driscoll didn't have the upper body strength and the power in his hands, in his arms that he had, his neck could have been broken.
As it was, the Lions captain was rushed to hospital with a dislocated shoulder. His tour was over, and he wouldn't play again for 5 months. Umaga and Mialamu received no punishment for the spear tackle.
I think it's the recklessness that really is the key. You know, there's the malice of trying to dislocate someone's shoulder, you don't know, but you certainly know they were reckless with the way they treated him.
For them to escape without any sanction, I thought was reprehensible.
I mean, Trevor Brennan loses his bop at Toulouse, gets into the stand and whacks somebody, and he gets banned for life. And in the biggest test match of that year, the two New Zealand stars do what they did to O'Driscoll and nothing happens.
Do you feel bad about it at all?
Oh, you do. Any incident that someone gets hurt, no one goes out there to intentionally hurt anyone, but these things happen in the game of rugby.
You've moved on.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, because
as much as we're talking about it now, all of my feelings for it, it's not about the two lads. It's just a little bit of a disappointment that I think the authorities didn't get it right.
Just watch it again now. Upside down and bang.
Our next story? At number 5, they seek him here, they seek him there.
No, not the Scarlet Pimpernel. No, it's not Lord Lucan either. And no, it's not Elvis. It's Shergar. No, it wasn't me. I have no idea where he is. Cross my heart.
It's amazing how that myth has grown. I was shocked.
It's stranger than fiction.
Where did he go?
You all know this story. The most famous kidnapping in Irish history was the kidnapping of a horse. But not just any horse. Shergar was a superstar.
Stop me now. I'm having such a good time. I'm having a ball.
And Shergar first, and the rest are nowhere. Here he comes, a really great horse.
It was the greatest horse we thought at the time ever.
At stud, had great potential.
Valued him as a stallion at 10 million, which was the highest priced stallion.
Yes, Shergar was set to become the most expensive date ever. And with his owners, which included the Aga Khan, setting him up with the ladies, left, right and centre, his value wasn't going unnoticed.
Gunmen entered the stud around 9 o'clock last night. They then loaded Shergar onto a horse box they'd brought with them.
Shergar's disappearance became global news, with the horse getting only marginally less attention than the Garda in charge of the investigation, Jim, or Spud, Murphy.
A stallion cannot be kept by people who are not well up in the horse recommendation and who do not know how to keep the animal.
Do you have any leads at the moment?
I have no leads.
The requisite ransom demand followed, and back came the demand for proof that the horse was actually still alive. Yes, just like in the movies.
The kidnappers sent a photograph of a horse, maybe not the horse, and they said that it wasn't enough. And the last communication from the kidnappers was, well, if that isn't enough, that's it, it's over.
But most people accept it was all over, not long after it began.
John O'Callaghan, the IRA informant, later on in his book, The Informer, he says that he was shot very quickly afterwards.
Well, it was shocking, even though you could argue that it was only a horse, and at the time the IRA were killing an awful lot of people.
In a country like this, it wouldn't have gained any sympathy for any cause to take a great horse and kill it.
Earlier we saw how Sonia O'Sullivan's performance at the Atlanta Olympics broke a few hearts. Now it's time for another performance at the same Olympics that raised a few eyebrows.
At number 4, it's the rise and fall of Michelle Smith.
You know, it's 11 years ago now. I was part of the medical team, and it was a fantastic time to be there. It was very proud to see an Irish flag go up to win a gold medal.
What a
start to these Olympic Games. Who would have believed it?
I remember staying up to watch it, you know, when I was a kid, and it's just been absolutely phenomenal, out of this world.
The whole world was taken by surprise. I mean, the Irish team must have been in shock. We go from not winning any medals hardly to, you know, getting 4 in 1 week.
And Michelle Smith has got a second gold medal. Absolutely superb.
The whole country was behind her and watching her, and it was fantastic what she was doing, because she was beating the lard out of the Americans, which was great.
And then there was all the speculation and talk and everything, and, you know, then you just didn't know what to think.
She made you very proud at one level, and then you said to yourself, nah.
Other people were thinking nah too, with an American swimmer leading the charge.
I remember it all came to the fore really after she had won her first gold medal, and she was competing then in the 400 metres freestyle, and Janet Evans, who was the doyenne of swimming in the United States, who didn't make the final, turned around and said, "This is crazy. I shouldn't be in 9th place. I should be in that final, and I'm being held back by someone who is cheating."
I think anytime any person, any country has dramatic improvements, there is that question. And I have heard that question posed in the last few weeks about this particular swimmer.
She was pointing the finger directly at someone Irish, one of our citizens, and it became a big issue.
One of the reasons I won it was because I put so much work in this season, so much long distance, and I think I was so much fitter than the other girls that I had the speed and I could just keep going.
For most of the country, Smith's success came as a bolt from the blue. But the swimming community had suspicions about the swimmer long before Atlanta.
It's extremely easy to cheat in the sport of swimming. If you don't rank in the top 50 of the world, you don't get randomly tested. You disappear off the radar. You don't compete for a year or 18 months, which is exactly what she did. She was sick at this competition, sick at that competition, not arriving at these competitions. And then you arrive back at a competition, and this was my last competition that I competed in, was the World Short Course Championships in Palma de Mallorca. I couldn't believe how she changed over the 18 months previously. And I said it to her, I said, you haven't done that by training. I said, you want to be extremely careful.
And booming and shining and wonderful with health and fitness, Michelle Smith has broken her Olympic training to come with a hamper of fresh fruit and vegetables for you all. There you are.
I went to a meeting in RTE in May of 1996, and the then editor, the sports editor, said, well, let's deal with swimming. What do we think is going to happen in swimming? And I said that in swimming, we're going to win 4 Olympic medals. At least 2 of them will be gold, maybe 3. And everyone around the table just laughed.
Yes. Well, you know we wish you the very best, Michelle, don't you? We really
Thank
do.
you very much.
In Atlanta, in July, we'll be watching.
And I said, you got to wake up, guys. She's going to do something extraordinary at these Olympic Games, and we have to be ready for it.
And Michelle Smith coming strongly again. She's got less than 5 metres to go now, and she's taken the lead. It's an unbelievable, incredible gold medal for the 3rd time. It is unbelievable.
We loved ourselves in 1996 to the extent that we would not believe that our little red-haired girl could be associated with anything as tainted as doping.
Olympic champion and gold medalist, Michelle Smith.
She presented us with this magical fairy tale, and by God did we buy into it big time.
It's a great night to be Irish. The only drug she needs is Guinness. That's the only thing she needs to cross that outline.
Michelle Smith had never tested positive for any drug up until that point, but the circumstances surrounding how well she did in the pool were circumstances enough for people to ask questions.
Have you ever been tempted?
No, absolutely not. If you're in the top 20 in the world, if you're going to international competitions, then you just, I mean, you're not going to be that stupid.
And there were some very brave journalists out there at the time that ran with this, you know, David Walsh, Paul Kimmage, Tom Humphreys, Paul Howard, and Eamon Dunphy, who was writing at the time. The big 5 who just decided this is wrong, we're going to go with this.
You know, what did Paul Kimmage and Tom Humphreys and David Walsh know about swimming before Atlanta? Nothing, absolutely nothing. So where were they getting their information from? They were getting the information from people within swimming. People who did not, who said, look, there's something seriously wrong with this girl. She has never shown the abilities that she has been showing in the last 2 years.
Well, she didn't set an Olympic record and she didn't set a world record. In fact, her times were, in some cases, 3 and 4 seconds slower than 3 Olympics previously when Evans was the champion. She won the 400 metres individual medley, the 200 individual medley, and the 400 freestyle, and in none of them was she within an ass's roar of a record. So tell me, if that's performance enhancing, it certainly didn't enhance, did it?
I gave a number of interviews at that time, and the answer will remain the same. Michelle Smith was clean at the Atlanta Olympic Games. She did all the tests that were available and she passed all the tests. Therefore, ipsit dixit, she was clean.
With her 4 medals, Smith returned home to a hero's welcome.
Welcome home. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And you could almost have won the swing dogs, the weather, but let me see. That's absolutely fantastic.
If Michelle Smith had just simply retired the first minute after she finished the Olympics and gone into TV presenting or whatever else, she would still be one of the greatest living, iconic and most loved Irish people ever. But she carried on, and the more she carried on, the more she put herself in a situation where she was going to be tested and retested and so on.
And she was targeted, and but if she's clean, she doesn't have a problem with that. You know, because if you are clean, it doesn't matter. You welcome that. If you're clean, then you don't care how many testers come to you there at any time of the day.
A game of cat and mouse ensued between Smith and the doping testers.
Michelle Smith finally departed from swimming when Alan K. Guy turned up at her house in Kilkenny in the early hours of the morning. The urine sample that she gave Alan K. Guy, who worked for an international drug testing organisation, that urine sample transpired to have unreasonable amounts of whiskey, enough that might kill someone had they taken it orally.
If it wasn't so serious, I think it would be just laughable. And I mean, I was wondering, was it Irish whiskey or Scotch whiskey, or, as I said, how many whiskey experts did they have in the lab?
If the test is in any way corrupted by the person taking the test, well, that's considered to be the worst possible thing to do.
I am innocent of these charges, and I intend fully defending them, if necessary, all the way to the International Sports Court in Switzerland.
It was necessary. The court found Smith guilty and banned her for 4 years.
So she was done on a tampering charge, which is a drugs offence. She didn't test positive for drugs, but she was banned for tampering with the sample.
Our lawyers demanded that this was open to the media, and it was as a result of that we learned that not only had the sample been tampered with, but it contained traces of androstenedione. I can't pronounce that word. Anyway, and this obviously, if the sample was tampered with, there had to be a reason for doing it.
The only thing I will say is, I'm only going on the facts. She was never tested positive in competition.
People within the swimming community are not shy about lumping her in with the Kristen Ottos, the East Germans of the 76 Olympic Games, the East Germans of the 88 Olympic Games, the Russians of the 80 Olympic Games. She is part of all of that.
But half the country, it's like Roy Keane, half the country don't believe that she's ever done anything to be ashamed of, and that she's as keen as a whistle.
Michelle Smith will always be there. She will always be the greatest living Irish Olympian, or at least the most successful.
It's done, it's dusted, she has her medals. We still have them in the record books, but there's a large asterisk beside all of those things.
You may be able to guess some of the remaining moments in our countdown, but how about the order? You and your votes decided it. So come back after the break to see what you chose as the top moments that shook Irish sport. And I can tell you now, Bernie Slavin's hair is not one of them, although it really should be. It really, really should be. I voted for it, repeatedly.
Introducing not the usual Shergar! 2 furlongs ahead, and he's won the Irish Derby! Shergar, why the long face?
luck now, right? But I think that's him over there.
I saw him, like, I'm not messing with you.
Yeah, you did, yeah. I'm telling you now, they're terrific out there.
Nice shot, Dodo. How are you, sugar?
How you doing, baby? I'm back.
Okay, sugar. You're up next.
Smithwick's, not the usual.
Why broadband? 'Cause this is my hobby. Though it's kind of becoming more than that. Why Aircom broadband? You get more. Like free remote storage for all these. Well, you never know. Plus free Setanta Sports on aircom.net. Ah, ref! And free wireless access out and about, thankfully.
Get broadband from just €15 a month within a bundle. Order online at aircom.net and get more with Aircom broadband.
Some people just don't get things. And some people do. Switch your current account to Ulster Bank. Our dedicated team is here to make switching easy, and you'll get transaction fee free banking and €150 cash free. Now you wouldn't want to miss that, would you?
Sam, €150! They're giving away €150!
Yeah!
What?
Text current to 50308 or run along to your local branch.
Let's do things differently. Ulster Bank.
The new Opel Antara. Explore the city limits. The new Opel Antara.
Save at Homebase, where there's 15% off kitchen units plus an extra 10% off all kitchens and appliances. But hurry, this offer must end November the 4th. Homebase.
Now I really like this. Great form and movement. Inspired colour palette.
Calvita Squigglers help you get calcium and vitamins into growing kids.
You might not feel your age, but wrinkles can tell a different story. It's time to target your A-zone, the area where wrinkles are most visible. New Garnier Ultralift Deep Wrinkle A with vitamin A and pure extract of ginger. Its precision applicator helps you target even deep wrinkles one by one, reducing the appearance of wrinkles and leaving your skin feeling firmer. Now your skin can tell a different story. Target your A-zone with new Garnier Ultralift Deep Wrinkle A. Take care.
Garnier.
I see people with sensitivity every day of my working life. It's usually triggered by hot, cold, sweet things. If you use Sensodyne regularly, after 2 weeks, the sensitivity is dramatically decreased.
Need a taxi? Better call 11890. Better call 11890. Need a restaurant?
Better call 11890.
Kick-ass directory inquiries.
There are times when you need to text everyone you know. So now with O2 Freedom, you can text anyone, whatever their network, free all weekend. O2 Freedom. Free texts all weekend to any network, only with Speakeasy from O2.
Perhaps it's too easy to be entertained by other people's misfortune. But the final sporting moments in our countdown are not simply about misfortune or bad luck. At times, there's real anger and malice at play here, and some very strong passions. And these stories got more votes than any other tonight, simply because they left such an indelible impression on you. Next up, a very bad night for Irish sport. The 15th of February, 1995.
Well, that night is etched in my memory, certainly. I had the dubious distinction of being the head of security that night. had a lot of meetings with the Gardaí, with the English FA. We expected a small amount of, let's say, dubious fans to come from England, and we had, I would say, 3 or 4 times the amount of meetings and preparations and rehearsals that we would have had before any other match.
President Mary Robinson came out and she was booed by the English supporters, and I think there was a flicker in some people's heads like, hang on, this isn't right, there's something going on here.
Now we're here for a match that is anything but a friendly in terms of the atmosphere. David Kelly...
There had been some tension before. We expected some kinds of incident, but we still expected a good sporting occasion.
A breeze whipping in across Lansdowne Road. The game is on and England playing in their away strip of all red.
England started off really well. Ireland came back at them, and it was really building up into you know, a fantastic atmosphere.
Here's Anderton, and the shot. Curly one in the box. Kelly!
And then David Kelly goes down and scores a perfectly good goal. I mean, we're going to hammer them.
That actually was the signal for the start of the riot in the 27th minute.
Well, there's trouble in the crowd. That's the West Stand in the Lansdowne Road Stadium, down by the Wanderers' pavilion rather. The referee has stopped the game because he's actually telling them to hold on, or is he telling them to play on? There are guards on the pitch. There is trouble in the crowd.
A bad night is right. A sad night.
27 minutes of the match gone, and the players are being taken from the pitch.
It was the worst thing I think I've ever seen in sport in Ireland, you know.
And there you can see the missiles still being thrown.
It was started by people who had no interest in the game. They came over to be disruptive.
And that kind of supporter just isn't welcome in any kind of sporting arena.
I remember thinking, my family is sitting up in the West Stand. You know, my daughter, my wife, my sister, my nephews or whatever were sitting in the West Stand where this was happening.
After some minutes, I suggested to the President that we should retire. And she said, no, we'll hang in, as it were. She was very brave, or very political, I'm not sure. I think the feeling at the time was, well, whatever happens, we'll be able to handle it. And what transpired was they weren't able to handle it. They had no idea how to handle it, and it got totally out of control.
The rest of the ground is sitting there just totally disgusted by what's going on. Just absolutely disgusted by what's going on.
It was really orchestrated bloody violence on behalf of a core group of English supporters who we subsequently found out belonged to a loose alliance of individuals called Combat 18. I remember looking up at the stand and seeing all these Nazi salutes and these hands going into the air like that, and I'd never seen anything like that.
Well, that is a press photographer who has been struck by a missile.
When I turned and saw a bench, which was about 12 foot long, big piece of timber land down on the crowd, I stood up and I said to my colleague, I'm not staying here.
I remember some very brave individual Gardaí and some security guys who were confronting what I described at the time, and I think it was still appropriate, this kind of subspecies of people who were just acting in animal-like behaviour and could not have cared less if they'd killed somebody that night.
I suppose if the guards deserve credit for one thing, it was that they prevented Irish fans from actually engaging with the English fans.
And there was very brave individual guys who kind of maintained a barrier there until the riot squad eventually came and half retrieved the situation.
I've never seen a game called off because of that situation. We are now going to be involved in a long, hard tussle about whose fault it was and where and what repercussions are of it.
The fact that there were only a couple of hundred involved probably saved the day, because in the end those people were corralled and they were diffused. Had there been any more, I think the situation could have been much worse.
We were very, very lucky to get away with it. As bad as it was very lucky that nobody was killed that night.
It's time for our penultimate moment, an event that has been dubbed by some as the GAA's finest hour, and by others as its darkest. Whatever you think about it, it opened a door and gave us the year's most emotional moment. At number 2, it's the temporary relaxation of Rule 42.
I don't think they could possibly have understood how enormous an occasion it was for us as a nation.
Just didn't realise how much passion was involved.
The hairs rose in the back of my head.
You wouldn't think that a stadium could cause such emotion.
It was just brilliant to be there.
This is the moment that most sporting fans thought they'd never live to see. A historic occasion which stemmed from the need to solve a practical problem. When Lansdowne Road closed its gates for renovation, it left the Irish soccer and rugby teams without a home of their own.
I think the prospect of the Irish soccer team and the Irish rugby team having to have their home internationals in Britain was just something that people didn't want to see.
How could I justify explaining to somebody why my neighbours have to travel to Cardiff when they could be going to a lovely New Croke Park?
But the lovely New Croke Park belonged to the GAA.
We were the only organisation in this country that could give them a dig out during the period when Lansdowne Road was being redeveloped.
It was really the only alternative option for us to play in front of any sort of size crowd.
However, Rule 42 banned the playing of foreign games on GAA turf and looked like an immovable object, written in the blood of Irish nationalism, where Michael Hogan and others had been massacred on Bloody Sunday.
I, for one, just regard it as a kind of a sacred ground.
I was very, very possessive of Croke Park.
I myself now, I have to say, I was hesitant at the beginning. I didn't think that this was going to work.
If the grassroots didn't have their say, it hadn't the hope enough to be passed.
And so began a fierce and passionate debate across the length and breadth of the country.
And they could never tear us apart.
I think they should open it up, definitely.
No, they should get their own pitches. Like, the GAA worked hard to get Croke Park.
Each and every person in every corner of Ireland had his or her say in the matter.
There's no excuse why the soccer people shouldn't have their own stadiums.
I think it should be opened up just to show off the stadium to Ireland and the world.
That's a joke. Disgrace. It shouldn't be allowed.
I was standing, you were there. Two worlds collided, and they
I knew it was going to be a very, very contentious debate.
Would it make any sense for me to allow my competitors the use of my showroom to display their goods?
If a neighbour's house went on fire, as a former Cathaoirleach of Wexford said to me the other night, and you had a spare room, you wouldn't leave them out in the cold.
The motion needed a 2/3 majority to be passed.
Tá 227, Ní 97, the motion is passed. Some saw us selling out on the core principle, and others saw it as an inspirational move for the association.
I think the Gaelic Athletic Association came of age as a sporting organisation, and we as a race came of age.
On the 11th of February 2007, rugby became the first foreign sport to be played on the hallowed ground of Park on Crokeig.
Referees this afternoon. We're off and running at Croke Park. The Six Nations visit the home of the GAA.
Certainly for me is a historic moment, because I couldn't imagine that you would have rugby or soccer played in Croke Park. I mean, the only blooming thing that went wrong was the fact that we lost to France. You know, we just needed to win to have the party.
The defensive line cannot hold up them. Somehow, Clark is going to find the try. He's found the try. France have the the try, and they are back in front.
Well, what can you say? It's cruel, it's savage.
But there was no time to dwell on the loss, as Irish sights were firmly set on our next opponent, the old enemy. 90 years after the Black and Tans had stormed into Croke Park, the English were back.
Brewing up a storm. Brewing up a storm.
That day, the English team were frazzled by the atmosphere and by the situation. I really thought it got to them in their heads.
I can say with certainty that there's never been anything like this.
I've experienced some fantastic atmospheres, but to have 80,000 Irish, or close to it, 75,000, and a handful of English thrown in there cheering you on, it's just an incredible experience.
Raw emotion, raw passion.
There was a huge air of tension, like would there be disruption? What would be the reaction to God Save the Queen? Would there be booing and all that?
Even going in, they were carrying placards. One of them said of me, Sean Judas Kelly, West Brit, and someone else referred to me as Devon McMurrough.
A respectful silence almost around Croke Park in anticipation.
I think there was all the furore whether it was going to be jeering at the English national anthem, and we're going to stand up, and I think to some degree maybe the English team were waiting for that, and they're waiting for a rallying cry to say like these people don't respect us, these fans don't respect us, they don't respect our national anthem.
And nothing happened. It was extraordinary. Nothing happened.
The way everybody stood and there was deadly silence. We were so proud of what had gone on, and then with the ferocity of our national anthem and the weight of history that carried, the fact that it was the first time that any of these things occurred, I think it was something that really gave us an edge.
People I know who didn't think they knew the words were suddenly singing them from the bottom of their lungs.
To look at them, to look at the tears streaming down their eyes.
I've never heard anything like it in my life.
This was Ireland embracing a new era, and even the toughest, the hardest men found it emotional, and that was great. We were actually saying, England, you're welcome here. The things that happened in the past are over. We're now meeting you as equals. We're playing your own game, and we're going to hammer the lard out of it.
There was no way we were going to allow ourselves to be beaten.
Shane Horgan's in position. Oh, yes! What a try! That is as good a try as you will see. Isaac Buss under the post. Smoke on their feet to salute the heroes in green.
It was a day that will long live in the history of every Irishman.
People will never forget the Ireland-England rugby match.
I think we live in a different world now after that day and that moment.
It was a day for an outpouring of emotion. It was a day to deliver, and Ireland can be well pleased with what they've achieved.
So, what's at the number one spot? Well, from the minute we asked you to start voting, this one event went straight to the top as the moment that shook, shocked, and rocked Irish sport. It may have divided the nation, but not when it came to voting. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you, in the blue corner, Mr. Michael Joseph McCarthy from Barnsley. And in the red corner, the pride of Mayfield, Mr. Roy Morris Keane. It's the number one moment that shook Irish sport. It can only be Saipan.
I think Saipan is one of the greatest disasters ever to have occurred in Irish sport.
A lot of people say, well, it's typical of Roy. Roy should really shut up, but I can't.
It had all the ingredients of drama. It was a tragedy in the true sense of the term.
23 lads, it's not just all about one player.
You never walk out in your country, not in a moment like that.
Do you think that Roy should apologise? No!
I'm very much in the Keane camp.
I think he got sent over telling the truth, so it's not right.
I'd supported him. I thought it was a good move, but I'm from Cork. We all support our own.
Without him there's not much help, is there?
I won't change my mind. He let us down.
If that's the way he's going to act, I'm better off without him.
He devalued the honour that people had of representing their country in international sport.
That's a rather trite comment.
No, but
it's a rather trite comment.
No,
we're talking about one of the greatest footballers in the world.
It's hurting you, this. No, of course it's hurting me. Dead right it is.
This story is all about good guy versus bad guy. The only problem is, Ireland still hasn't worked out who's good and who's bad. But one thing's for sure, even before they set foot in Japan for the 2002 World Cup, there was no love lost between Mick McCarthy and Roy Keane.
Not looking forward to the trip. It's going to be a long day for us, but I'm sure once we get over there we'll get set for the first match, and we're all looking forward to it.
If you look retrospectively at all the coverage of the World Cup, it was not considered a good World Cup, not a good quality World Cup. So Keane believed actually we could do well. And he couldn't understand going to this island where there was no proper pitch, there were no footballs, there were no nets, there was not a sociability, there was drinking with the journalists, there were parties, and he said this is 1 week before the World Cup.
What was his line? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
A lot of people in the country understood exactly what he was saying. No more plastic paddies, no more party hats. We're going there to achieve something.
He's got a certain standard and he doesn't expect anything below it. And if you have that at club level, well, the standard should be even higher for international.
Keane had issues with the lack of facilities, preparation and commitment, and following a training ground bust-up, decided enough was enough. He was heading home. He then changed his mind, but he didn't stay quietly. Instead, he gave a frank interview to the Irish Times outlining his grievances.
Keane, I think, felt very strongly, very passionately, that somebody had to blow the whistle on this. Someone had to say, you know, what's going on here, guys?
We come over here, we travel halfway across the world, and the training pitch is a disgrace. And somebody's got to hold a hand up and say, it's like training on a car park.
His point was, why can't we train at a facility that's as good as the Germans and the English and the other people we're playing against? And he was right.
I'm certainly of the view that the idea of calling Keane in front of the entire squad and asking him to explain himself for that interview was for certain to cause an explosion and for certain to lead to the result.
Football is not a matter of life or death. It's more important than that. Never has the old cliché seemed more apt than today with the news that Ireland will enter the World Cup finals without the leadership of one of the world's greatest soccer players.
Captain and best player Roy Keane was dramatically kicked out of the squad. He was told to pack his bags after a training ground bust-up with one of the coaches.
It was astonishing. And even when we were there, we knew this was the biggest thing we were ever going to cover as sports writers. It was just absolutely incredible.
Roy, can you give us just one reaction being sent home from the World Cup?
He should never have left, regardless of what grudges he held against anybody. He could have bore his grudges for a while and then released his fury when he got home to Ireland. Or released his fury when he got knocked out, went over and slapped Mick on the touchline or something like, you know.
Heading out next week, so I'm just shocked at the news.
Without him there's not much help, is there?
If that's the way he's going to act, I'm better off without him.
Don't see him walking out on the Irish team because of Roy Keane. I think he's walked out on principle, if he has walked out.
the impression lasts that Roy Keane walked out. The reality is that he threatened to walk out. He then changed his mind and said he'd stay, but McCarthy wouldn't accept that change of mind.
What people think about me, I can't change. What I've ever done for Ireland, for my country, is play as well as I could, manage as best I could, and do you know something? I think I've done a damn good job of it.
Before anybody knew it, Mick and the lads were in Japan and Roy was back in England.
Supporters had been pinning their hopes on the Taoiseach's intervention. A spokesperson, manager Mick McCarthy, said he wouldn't be taking any more questions on the subject.
Just 4 days till the Irish team line out against Cameroon, and Keane is still the only news. And today the World Cup.
This was on every page of the newspaper. It was the lead item on every news bulletin. And just, you know, the rumours flying around, the text messages. There was planes on the runway in Manchester waiting to bring him back. There was the Tommy Gorman interview.
What about all the little kids in Ireland who have you as a role model, who love you, who would love to see you back in the World Cup, and who are absolutely appalled that this row has taken place and don't know what to say? Exactly. Well, you know, do you think I've enjoyed the last few days? It's been hard, of course it has, but it's out of my hands. It really is. As I said, I'm standing firm on what I believe in.
The whole thing was quite silly, the way everyone in the country could get so obsessed about it. And you'd have 80-year-old women who'd never seen a football match in their lives ringing in Joe Duffy.
Do you think that Roy should apologise?
No, definitely not. He's nothing to apologise for.
I heard somebody describe it as, you know, it was a bit like Britain in the wake of Princess Diana's funeral, you know, and the wake of her death, and the outpouring of grief was so dramatic and so hysterical.
That's amazing, because I was actually thinking last night, because I saw something about Princess Diana, and I thought Roy is our Princess Diana, actually. He has that, he's the people's prince, isn't he? People absolutely adore him.
He's been let down by the FAI. He's been let down at the end of the day by his colleagues. He's a great player. I don't think we deserve it.
So they're all out of step except our Roy, is that it?
No, John, that's a rather trite comment.
No, but
it's a rather trite comment.
No, we're talking
about one of the greatest footballers in the world. Well, talk about him with some respect.
Do you think the rest of the team are out of step then?
Yes, I do. I think I agree with Roy.
Roy Keane didn't fly back to save the day. Ireland didn't win the World Cup.
That's come out to Holland. 1-1!
If we look at how we did in that tournament, if Roy Keane had been there, there's no saying what we could have done.
What a day for a daydream. Here's Roy Keane. Yes!
Jeez, you know, I've actually thought about this probably every time I've watched an Irish soccer game. You know, we possibly had a chance to win that World Cup.
Oh, there's three! Ireland are through now.
But people will always say, of course, if Roy had been playing, we definitely won the World Cup. And even if we had won the World Cup without Roy, people would say, if Roy had been playing, we would have won it and probably beaten every team with 3-0 and been like better than the Brazil team in 1970.
Against Shea Given.
Yeah, that's it. We're done. Final whistle, cross the line, split decision. Photo finish, won on points, golden goal. At the end of the day, you know, the end is here. And they did it their way. I don't know if the earth moved for you, but this crowd certainly shook Irish sport. Now, by my reckoning, I've stayed on my feet at least 80 times longer than Bernard Dunne. So if you don't mind, I'm off for my lap of honour.